So we have the bird again. I
Yeah.
think there's one in my garden as well.
Yeah, I can hear.
That bird led the, Tessa, you weren't here last week, but that bird was leading the meditation for us last week.
Yeah.
Being in the present moment, yeah.
Yeah.
What was the name of the Thich Nhat Hanh talk? Because I
Okay, it's called Touching Eternity.
Yeah.
Touching Eternity, right? Okay,
Yeah.
and the figure of 6 degrees warming, where did that come from?
Yeah, he mentioned that in connection with the previous mass extinction, which happened 250 million years ago.
Okay.
And it's been mentioned, by many people as a highly likely outcome of the present global warming if we do not.
Seems quite, I mean, I'm an ex-geography teacher, and that seemed high to me, which is why I queried it.
It's very high. It's very high.
Very high.
If we do not curtail fossil fuel consumption very, very quickly, there's very good reason to believe we'll go into an overshoot, which will take us probably to 6 degrees of warming.
Okay.
This will be a very big catastrophe. A Permian mass
It's interesting that previous mass extinctions have been natural events. So
This one is also a natural event.
Well, what we're talking about is human accelerated climate change, which
Yes.
it's the speed of change that's causing the problems, because normally natural events take place. Okay, volcanic eruptions, you will get quite a marked change in an environmental, and that can affect globally. But normally it's due to continental movement and mass movements of the planets, and it's a much slower change, so species can quite often adapt. What we're talking about is a much faster change accelerated by human beings,
Yeah.
and the chance of adaptation is far less.
Well, those mass extinctions have taken place often. There's been extremely rapid climate change. There's been one reason why there's been a mass extinction. It's not anything very new that there's extremely rapid climate change. It's happened a number of times. But we're talking about a severe mass extinction. We're not talking about anything less than that. That is a very, very grave situation indeed. The Permian mass extinction, which it resulted in 95% species loss over a period, and that species loss took place over a period about 60,000 years, actually. But most of it probably in a very short time.
That was the asteroid strike.
No.
Okay, all right.
No, that was, there may have been asteroids. I think some people think there might have been asteroids. The asteroid, the one that's known to be an asteroid was the Jurassic, the 65 million years ago. And in that, that was about 65% of species came extinct then. The Permian mass extinction 250 million years ago ended the Permian era, and 95% of species became extinct. And there was probably 8 to 10 degrees of climate change, actually. But there were other things that made it.
Do we know what the trigger was?
Well, there was massive volcanic activity, which resulted in CO2 levels about 5 times higher than what they are now. So it was, there were lots of, there was probably other things that, like
smoke cover.
Smoke cover, yeah, lots of problems that caused. It was a multiple, cause. But we already have lost a third of the species in the last, within a century or so, and the rate of species loss is accelerating, and that's without severe climate change. We're only into 1.2 degrees or something at the moment. So, we're going to see very, very big species loss, and we're almost certainly going to see very severe decline in human population. If we go beyond the tipping point, and many people think we are already beyond the tipping point, and there's no sign of the carbon emissions going down. So it looks very likely that that's what we're going to see.
One of the things I'm aware of from today, I think it's actually on Facebook rather than on the news, so whether the main news will pick it up or not, I don't know. But is the fact that the Quakers are making a real stance to say that what we should be doing as we're coming out of all these lockdowns in all the countries is to make sure that we're coming out of it in a much greener way.
A lot of people are saying that, and yes, I think
they
there's
are,
some hope that it may make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're actually advocating it and standing. They've actually had demonstrations to say that this is what should be doing, and I think the Extinction Rebellion have also been doing the same.
Sure.
People are saying, "Oh, why are they demonstrating at a time like this?" And the reason they are is to try and say this is like a wake-up call. This is a chance to make a difference. So they're sort of, people are trying to do it, but there's just as many people then, sadly, that are saying, "Oh, I can't wait to get back to the shops. I can't wait to get back to the cafes. I can't wait to get back to the pubs." And you know, I don't know who's going to be shouting the loudest as such, as to who's going to be listening. There seem to be more people at the moment who are very happy to still keep the brakes on.
I hope so.
Which might give them more time to think.
Yeah.
And maybe they might listen to some of these people who are giving alternative suggestions for coming out of it as well.
Yeah, I think there will be an effect, beneficial effect in terms of so a reduction of some ecological impacts. I think, this is an example, isn't it? I mean, everybody's meeting on Zoom. So somebody was it in this group? No, it was another group. Somebody was saying she works for the Halifax, and they've decided to close their head office because they realized that in the lockdown, they were able to do everything without people having to come into the office. It's costing them millions of pounds a year to run that office. I'm sure many businesses are thinking the same thing. We're doing the Compassion Festival thing and we're realizing, oh, well, we don't need to have everything live events, So anybody who's organizing events might be thinking, perhaps we can do some of this online. So that's one thing, but many reasons, I think. There will be some beneficial effects. The question is, which tipping point do we get to first? To me, because I think that very clearly there is a growing sort of process of people waking up. More and more people are realizing, on many different levels, because it starts with, oh gosh, I ought to be thinking about the environment, and then you realize as you get deeper into that conversation with yourself and with people, that there are layers and layers of change in your lifestyle and thinking and attitudes that take you further towards a sustainable lifestyle. And I think it's a small number of people that are realizing this is really about a change in consciousness, but that's growing very fast. And that needs to grow. Will it? I mean, and at some point it'll reach a tipping point, I think. I think that's clear. That the sort of, the reaction, it's a rearguard action of people, people still being in denial about climate change and so on. And ultimately it will be unavoidable. But the question is, will it by then be too late? And that we just don't know. We don't know. We really don't know the future. This is my conclusion, of having speculated, thought about it and read about it and studied it for years and years and years, I eventually come to the conclusion that, first of all, the best way to look at it is we don't know, and not to fall into conviction of despair or a conviction, on the other hand, of blithe optimism. That's also not helpful, The truth is we really don't know. We didn't expect this. And we probably, the next thing that comes, we won't be expecting. And it could be, positive or negative. And this has positives as well as negatives. So it's really, we can speculate endlessly about what might happen. Or are we doomed or aren't we doomed? The question is, how do we live? How do we think? How do we relate to our feelings? How do we, find the most positive way of being in this situation?
One thing I find very refreshing about Thich Nhat Hanh is the positive attitude that he is aware of the calamity, the possibility of the calamity. At the same time, he's not saying just sit down and meditate and everything will go away. He's advocating that what uh, you mentioned, that a lot of people are suddenly realizing through this experience that they no longer need to have a physical office. My brother, I was talking to my brother in New Jersey, he's a office manager,
Mhm.
and he said, we have to have an office in order to store the legal documents. And then suddenly, when they were thrown into this, he said, we changed all our office system. We were forced to change because of the lockdown. And now the owner is thinking, well, all I need is a store somewhere. I could have a
Yeah.
self-storage. I don't need a posh office,
That's right.
which was in the middle of Manhattan.
It's
With
fairly obvious, really.
Yeah, but it was obvious before. They were thinking of moving to Florida, but they didn't want to leave his pad in Manhattan, and everyone was happy where they were. So they're realizing it. The second thing is what Thich Nhat Hanh's advocacy is similar to what was done, as you mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, the Yogastha Kurukarmani. It is embedded in yoga, you take the action. So you do not desire the results. You do not fear the future or whether your actions are going to work out or not. And that is what a lot of people are going through now. The fear, the petrification,
Yeah.
rabbit caught in the headlights. It's come upon most people suddenly. A lot of people have been thinking about it, but not enough. Now more people have realized, and perhaps this shake up may not be adequate. The next shake up might be even more violent. Climate catastrophe is still waiting to strike, and so that's like bound to come. But as long as more people are realizing that what's in my hands is myself. The second thing is the community, and as you pointed out, whether there are physical communities which are appropriate for the young people, and a lot of young people are thinking of it. Eco Village is of GTI, the Ozil inspired ideas. That is a classic example of that, and that experiment has been done before with
Yeah.
varying degrees of success. I don't know whether you've heard of Auroville.
I know about Oroville. I founded
Yeah.
an eco village, by the way.
Sorry.
I founded an eco village.
All right, yeah. Those are experiments that were done. There were some difficulties in there, individual difficulties. So perhaps the individual aspect wasn't addressed strongly enough, and things fell apart. And that's something to learn from, and maybe establish more stable communities. And for older people like many of us here, we are just we've got our commitments, we've got our roots already in our lifestyle, and perhaps I'm very much tempted to go into a physical community, but there are some obligations, and but I would encourage many young people who desire to do so, to do so straight away. And in there lies the future. I mean, we often felt driven to procreate, to create a life that would continue after us.
Right. Yeah.
And that is what's a lot of people are resisting now. That how can we deal with, how can we deal without these luxuries?
Yeah, I mean,
So
to some extent, it is difficult, as Thich Nhat Hanh said. If you are physical lifestyle is a conventional one within a big city, it may be it may be difficult to do without your own car, or even, you know, have more than one car in a family. And having more than one car in a family, when you look at it objectively, is a level of sort of luxurious living that the planet is not going to be able to afford. I mean, that, you know, but it's become normalized, and unless we change the kind of communities that we live in, it will be difficult to live with the level of consumption that is necessary. But if we do change the way that we organize our communities, then not only is it not difficult, it can be much more, you know, a much better level of well-being and happiness, with a much lower level of consumption, which is very difficult to achieve with the kind of, you know, fragmented, everybody having their own home. I mean, I was a bit staggered. Perhaps I'm naive, but a few years ago, it came to my attention that it's now common in America for married couples, I mean, married couples without children, to each have their own house, because sharing the same house is too difficult for them. They need, I need my own space. I need a large house of my own that my husband can come and visit. You know, he has his own large house, and I can go there if I feel like it. But we can't. We don't have to be forced to be in the same four walls. You know? And I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? We have to. You know, there's an ecological imperative, I would say, for us to move away from that kind of hyper individualistic living, and it's not only is it you know, ecologically destructive, but it's not psychologically healthy either.
But that's a natural result of what Thich Nhat Hanh talks about, the suffering inside, the feeling of emptiness inside, that you need to fill it with other things. So if you can't live within yourself, with yourself, it's unlikely you can live with somebody else.
That's true. Of course, you know, there's two sides to it, aren't there? I mean, in order to develop the ability to be really balanced and whole as an individual, you need the support of, you need to work within a community as well. We need Sangha. So, as you say, you know, many of those eco-village experiments, some of them, many of them have failed, but many of the successful ones are partially successful in some areas and not in others. Of course, they're not. None of them are probably perfect, but is perfection even something to aim at? But they're all experiments, and something new is evolving. And I just, you know, I mean, I have believed this for many years. As I said, I put some years of work into attempting to create an eco-village in Leeds. I eventually left the group because I didn't think that my wife would want to live in that community, and I felt therefore it was wrong for me to continue having an excessive influence over the way that it went, because of having been the person who kind of started the project. But that's now a very successful eco-village community within Leeds, and there are two more that are kind of following its model. So, you know, to some extent walking that talk. And I do think now I feel, you know, I'm being drawn towards thinking seriously about living in a physical community again now.
The Steiner communities have been doing this for many years, of course.
Yeah.
The Steiner community villages that are all for ordinary people as well as those with learning difficulties. But I know when
it's not a new idea, no.
many years, and they're self-sustaining. They have farms, they produce their own food and everything. So there's very little that they have to bring in from outside. And when you go up to places like Sammy Ling, they've got a community. They've got a community that's there. They're growing things that are there. They still have to bring in certain things, but It will be interesting to see how much they're reflecting on what, you know.
Sorry,
He's just frozen.
we've
now.
lost,
Come back in a
we've
minute.
lost her, yeah.
D.
No.
Are you still there, Dee?
Well, she's
Yeah.
frozen, so we don't know.
One thing, if you do get drawn into your physical community, we do hope, well, at least I do hope that you would continue your online community with us.
Yeah, of course. And I was going to say that, you know, more immediately relevant is the fact that this is an online community. And I think that the online communities are, hello, Dee, you're back. Can you hear us?
I don't know what happened there. Yes, it just totally went.
It just froze.
Right.
Connection went. Sorry. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I was just yeah. I'll invite you to finish what you were saying in a moment. But I've just finished what I was saying first. So I've talked about the physical communities, but not so much about online communities. But I do think that they are extremely important right now. I mean, not just because we're in lockdown, you know, but that has opened up a massive additional opportunity. But clearly, I think they are very, very important, and they are enabling people to connect around the world who have similar concerns and so on. So even though this is tiny, there's only 6 of us today, and there's a couple of other people who come from time to time, I'm very clear this is a community. And these type of communities are also extremely important in what's happening and in this process of awakening that needs to happen. And I believe it is happening, you know. So as I say, we can predict the outcome, but we can say that this mutual awakening that is the work that we are engaged in here right now today, on this call. This is the work that needs to be done, alongside, of course, of the the physical things such as permaculture and so on, and all of the other. But this is vitally important. This is where that. Thich Nhat Hanh says, if we do not transform our consciousness, there is no solution. And this is it. This is the work. So, I do want to express my appreciation and gratitude to you all for being willing to, in fact, encouraging me to come with you on this journey, and I just, I think we shouldn't underestimate how significant it can be.
I class this as one of my feeding my soul times.
Nourishing, yes.
It's nourishing me. It's actually making me think, and definitely raising consciousness that was there, but actually making you think about just a little bit deeper about what else you can do, and about maybe passing on these messages in a slightly different way to other people.
Right.
So it's been part of that ripple again, this ripple effect, that you can pass things on a little bit. So yeah.
So
I'm
in the beginning,
grateful for it happening.
It is easy to underestimate how significant that is, and I don't think we should underestimate it.
I don't know if any of you subscribe to Positive News.
I don't subscribe to it. I know Positive News. I get it occasionally.
I've recently, in an attempt to get away from negative news, I've actually started to subscribe, and it's quite heartening the number of small-scale projects worldwide involving communities, environmental action, climate, sustainability, fair trade. There's a lot out there, but it's not joined up. And I think we're looking at global consumerism, global models of economics, and there's lots of good out there, but it's very piecemeal and very isolated. I think if it came together and became a global movement, almost like Extinction Rebellion, they're a little bit extreme for me, but there's lots of unjoined up thinking yet. If it all joined up, it would become a huge force.
Well, it is joining up, and that, you know, that's something I've been observing over the years. I actually got involved in working on sustainability nearly 20 years ago at a conference which was organized by, interestingly, a friend of mine who was also the person who inspired me to start the Jamming Buddhist Center. She was, so this was in Herefordshire, and she had started a venture, I suppose, called Green Links, which was just simply, all it was it was a monthly magazine where the different environmental groups had, you know, were able to sort of advertise themselves and list their events and everything, and kind of join together. And they were, at that time, so nearly 20 years ago, and rural Herefordshire wasn't kind of at the forefront of everything. So they were very small, and they were, you know, and they were feeling quite powerless. But because they were able to get joined up like that, they became much more powerful. And there was a national conference on sustainability that was organized by this group with very, you know, prominent speakers like Jonathan Horrett and Satish Kumar, but the local speakers were just as impressive. So we saw there the power of that connection, exactly as you say, Tessa. And there've been lots of things. So I then, you know, was inspired, and I did a similar thing in Leeds, which then became, and eventually became Schumacher North. I mean,
there's the Schumacher, there's Resurgence. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Satish Kumar, Centre for Alternative Technology, Findhorn Community. There's lots of stuff out there.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff. I mean, I used to live in Holmfirth, and we had Holmfirth Transition Town.
Yep.
And they were very much into community energy projects. We were talking about putting Archimedes screw on the river, putting another wind vane up, that sort of thing. I don't know if small market towns are better placed to actually form these communities. I mean, you've mentioned communities within big cities, but somehow to me, small market towns seem ideally placed for.
Both can work. You know, there are lots of different forms that work. You know, as you say, like, you know, isolated rural locations like Findhorn. You know, but some in smaller towns, there's a different kind of context. Cities, you have another different context as well. They're just different, you know, different things work in different situations. But I think, yes, it is. It's growing. It's becoming more connected. But I think there's a new wave, if you like, which is more about transforming awareness that is now becoming, you know, more prominent, and the eco and the dharma are joining together in a very interesting way. So it is an interesting time to be involved in this. Anyway, it's probably time that we just move to a few moments of reflection and dedicating our merits.